So when I was 5, no, just kidding. I will do a quick college story though, which is I took a class that was called Urban Redevelopment and Social Justice. Can we have both? That was this class at Michigan that was taught by somebody who had a joint appointment in the African American Studies Department and the School of Architecture. And, you know, it was somebody trying to expose, you know, upperclassmen to community organizing models. You know, I kind of didn't realize it at the time, but we were going on site visits essentially to see grassroots community leaders in Detroit, and he was playing civil rights, you know, audio tape and all of this, you know, back in the dark ages, pre-internet, no fancy things coming into your classroom. But it was this really interesting exposure around basically trying to say, you know, you're 20 years old, you don't believe me now, but you're going to be in positions of power to make decisions around things that matter in this world. So, you know, early training around being a part of the solution. So anyway, that class affected me pretty seriously, and I ended up going to DC for the first time after I graduated. Stumbled into this world of national associations of local governments trying to help municipal government be more efficient and effective, not reinvent the wheel, transfer technology and solutions across urban jurisdictions. So I worked managing a network of large cities and urban counties for a couple of years. Then had my business school versus public policy school decision point, and got practical and went to business school. And so went to Kellogg, but with the idea actually that I did want to stay in the nonprofit sector in some capacity. And so my post-business school path has been, strangely enough, another association, so kind of building on that pre-business school work, but an association of foundations and corporate giving programs here in New York, the New York Regional Association of Grant Makers, NIRAG. I was their Director of Communications and Government Relations, and so at that point got to really know a lot of the funding community, especially the local folks. There were many more banks back then when I was at NIRAG, and so, you know, all the banks and a lot of the local funders especially worked with them to collaborate with city government to do public-private partnerships that made sense for especially low-income neighborhoods in New York. Did their first website, you know, all that good stuff back in the day. So anyway, transitioned from doing professional development and collaboration and work with the field of professional, you know, organized philanthropist type, to working at Robin Hood, which I'd gotten to know the Robin Hood folks through NIRAG. And, you know, at that point, I think their model was like MBA with a heart. You know, they kind of wanted somebody with the kind of more quantitative skill set, but also maybe had some understanding around youth development issues, and I'd done a lot of work with youth funders at NIRAG, and so I managed a portfolio there of their youth programs, a little bit of their education work as well. And then transitioned to JPMorgan about 10 years ago. And when I joined Morgan, my team did a blend of the corporate contributions work for the company, as well as some private client work. We were kind of this interesting hybrid for about 40 years where there was this sense of, if you've got content people who understand community development and human services and the arts and other kinds of issues, why not have them be available to help around kind of legacy trusts, foundations that were set up with families, tax reasons, no children. You know, there were some foundations that the bank was responsible for from a discretionary grant making standpoint, and then moreover, you know, there are wealthy people who would be looking for advice around these topics as well. So the first couple years was this blended role. The past 5, since I've been heading up the group, it's really, we transitioned the corporate work a number of years ago, a couple of mergers ago, and so it's really been focused around the private client piece, really ramping that up, figuring out how we can be a clearinghouse on the charitable interests of ultra-high net worth people. We're a global support team. There's about 10 of us here in New York. Lot of what we do is pretty U.S. focused because of philanthropy being a mature market here, but again, partnering with wealth advisors and others around the world to be able to help families. And, you know, it could be anything from, a startup situation where a family's trying to go from checkbook giving to more structured approach. Do they do a donor advised fund? Do they do a private foundation? If they opt for the private foundation strategy, mission, funding guidelines, what do other wealthy families do? What are some of the family dynamics issues to be aware of? they might have a handful of organizations that they've been working with for some time, and they want to make a much bigger gift. So vetting and making sure that leading them through a process there that might make sure that there isn't misunderstanding. And other times it's getting a scan of the field around what's out there, what can build upon the family's knowledge, and so on and so forth. So we'll get into it more, but really varied kind of giving where on an ongoing basis, we're helping about 65 different foundations with about $100 million a year in giving annually, and then we're touching a lot of other folks, another couple hundred, I'd say, at various stages from kind of short-term engagement to something that might lead to something longer.